which governments can get involved in creating the atmosphere that allows brands associated with a particular country to develop themselves. I'm going to give the floor to each of my panelists in turn, and then we'll open it up to broader discussion and indeed to debate around you. So some of the questions they're going to consider the extent to which governments play an important role, the extent to which brands that are locally made can be built up from scratch, the restrictions that come into play, the possibilities that are there. If I could give the floor, perhaps first of all, to Michaela Celi. You represent the Dubai Design and Fashion Council. So yours is a sort of case study in promoting local brands, because of course we're talking about this in the context of the Middle East in particular, and what can be done in this part of the world to try and create some local brands, perhaps in the way that French brands and Italian brands benefit from being French and Italian brands. Tell us a little bit about your view on the possibilities.
Okay, sure. So basically, I would like to start, thinking about what is the strategy of the government of Dubai about promoting the fashion and design sector. And what I like about the city and the management vision of this emirate is thinking strategically from the basis till the creation of the whole ecosystem. So basically, what we have done in Dubai is starting with assessing what is the current situation of the fashion and design industry. And His Highness Sheikh Mohammed decided to launch first the Dubai Design District, for example, as a common base for all these designers and to promote the sector, as well as in 2013 and officially in August 2014 to launch the Dubai Design and Fashion Council that has in the vision and in the mission, the important thing is about promoting the sector in Dubai, the design and fashion, and to support local and emerging talent. So basically what we see is that Dubai is very rich of creativity. We have a lot of designers that they make their name famous internationally, but most of those are couturier. So basically they do like a small production and most of the time unique pieces. And for them it's quite a challenge to source all the materials here and to find good tailors, because even if there's a 25 years tradition in this fashion sector, still we are lagging behind when it comes to production, when it comes to identify the right talent, and when it comes to expanding the brand internationally. So what we are doing at the moment is to support, first to create the network and to identify where are the stages in this ecosystem and where the designers they need support. Because more and more we identify that they need support in production, but sometimes the cost of production is prohibited here in the UAE for them to expand and to create a bigger collection. And so our role as a council is also to create connection with other production hubs. And this is something we are building at the moment. If you think, for example, even prestigious brands, they are shifting their production either to East Europe or to Asia. So we would like to create this network of contacts with production hubs. One, for example, can be Turkey, that is also geographically in geographical proximity with Dubai and the UAE. Or, for example, India, that is very strong connected also for sourcing of materials. So all these steps that we are currently taking is to identify what is the value chain, what is the current status in the value chain, identify what are the gaps, and try to support the designers in filling these gaps, and make sure that there's a proper vision behind this and support from the government. I would like just to mention that the Dubai Design and Fashion Council, when it was established, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed put a lot of effort on balancing also the board of directors to make sure that we have representatives from the government. For example, Dubai SME is part of the board of directors. DTCM, that is the Tourism and Marketing Authority, is also part of the board, as well as private players like the distributor, like Patrick Chalubor, Khalid Al-Tayer are part of the board. The malls with MAF, Majid Al-Futain, and of course the media. So it's a whole ecosystem that we want to create and to support the designer in their journey till launching their brand internationally.
We'll come back to that idea of an ecosystem that can be created essentially from scratch, to try and build it up, and how effective you guys advises brands on positioning. You are also an academic, since you represent the ISSEC business School in Paris. You are its academic director. If you could give us an idea of your position on the extent to which local associations of brands matter and the extent to which local branding can be good.
Well, it does matter because, as Nicola said, for those designers, it is very hard to make a connection with business activities. It's not part of their main, I would say, even curriculum when they study, about the art of designing and that kind of thing. So I'm teaching at SI, but I'm also teaching in designer schools such as Instituto Marangoni in Paris. And here, I mean, it's really important to notice that people don't have a clue about how to build a business. And I'm speaking about technical things such as, accounting or that kind of things. But besides from that, what is even more important is about how to build my brand. So here, that's where you need some support because building a brand, I mean, it usually takes at least 10 years. So if you mess up from the starting point, you mess up, for the rest of for the next 10 years. So it's very, very important to take a step back at the initial point and try to get some support from official, let's say, entities. And those clusters, I would say, around designers or around industries. In Europe, we have a lot of clusters specialized in the art of lace, in the art of wood, in the art of leather, etc. They are so numerous that in the end we don't even know which one is doing what, but everyone is supposed to be focused on something, and they are here to help newcomers to launch or to understand how the business is working. But they are also here to defend their rights as suppliers for luxury brands as well. Like if you are a designer and you are working as a subcontractor for one luxury company, what are your rights? How can you defend your intellectual property rights? How can you export yourself? Because here we are speaking of local designers, but the important is, what will be this made in Dubai? What will make that sellable abroad? Because it's not only about local selling, local market, but it's also about foreign market. So here, and they cannot do that alone. So those clusters really do help a lot.
Apart from anything else, because you were saying before, it takes research in order to understand what people read into a brand, what people see as being the connections, the mental associations that they make with a brand being from such and such a country or made in such and such a place. You need, first of all, to understand that, and that requires research, which is not the job of a designer.
Yeah, sure. The point is, as for any company, as for any business, if you want to sell properly your products, you have to understand consumers. And you have to segment your market in the proper way. The point is that when you launch brands, especially in the luxury or premium industry, you do that in one country, and then the image of this country becomes also associated with your brand. So you are a brand which is, let's say, designed in Dubai, but then where is this manufactured? Where are the products assembled? Where are the headquarters? Maybe the designer is in Dubai, but maybe they have put that Paris underneath because it sounds better to have headquarters in Paris, or it looks like something better. So the real point is, when you launch a brand, and let's keep Dubai as an example, when you launch a brand which says, okay, I'm designing everything in Dubai, and I'm producing also locally, so I'm a real made in Dubai brand. The point is that people understand this brand, but they understand the made in Dubai as well. So all the associations, mental associations that people have with Dubai are going to be transferred by what we call a halo effect to the brand itself. So if, and the country is perceived maybe as, I don't know, I have not made the exercise of Dubai, but so I would not like to say something which is wrong, but let's say, for example, it's a bit more show-off than other countries, then it means that your brand becomes automatically associated with some kind of show-off. You see my point? So I'm not saying it's a curse, I'm just saying that you have to understand where things of the made-in are transferred to your brand just to anticipate the potential success or criticism which might be transferred to your own brand.
They need to understand both the negative and the positive
Absolutely, both.
implications. We'll come back to that in just a moment.
that is in some way a trial to in some way underline the real made-in effect again of being generally open to discuss where a piece of clothing has been made, and I think that's a discussion that not only the designer has to have, but also the customer or consumer needs to start looking at that again. I think the whole discussion about made in can be done on a sort of around mental association, as you said. So what does made in France or made in Italy mean for you? For example, we work heavily in Italy at the moment to in some way incentivize the made in Italy brand again, but we stopped calling it made in Italy. We call it well done in Italy, simply because made in Italy has been trashed in some way. Italy counts on 4 big textile areas. There's a city south of Florence called Prato. Ferragamo and Prada started out there. It is now the largest Chinese city outside of China, and basically Chinese companies show the Italians how to circumnavigate the law pretty effectively and produce high street fashion with a made in Italy label. So basically just the sort of last elements of the production chain are being done in Prato.
But in fact they're made elsewhere.
Yeah, so I mean they're done with the same working and unethical working conditions that you would find somewhere else, but there's this whole element of we call them the white trucks arriving at night. The last piece of the stitching process is done in Prato, and then they're being shipped out. And at the end, you can buy these products from H&M to Zara pretty much everywhere in Europe. So that is the other side of made in Italy or made in France or whatever you would like to call it. And therefore, I think the consumer and the customer as well started to in some way question that, and therefore, as long as we don't have an actual process of verification of where a garment is actually made in, similar to the wine industry with the DOC label, the whole element of made in does not really matter. But what matters is if you then tell a story and perhaps your entire design process gets in some way brought into your garment, and it then has a valid and added value again. Perhaps the designers who sell the best or get the most traffic on our platform are always the designers who in some way have created a regional identity, and that means designers who have in some way brought their experiences, their memories, their way of living, the fabrics that they can find locally into their garments, and these are usually the products that consumers or customers seek the most. So it is
not necessarily from such and such place, but from anywhere where a story has been told.
Exactly. If the story is told in the right way, and at that point it doesn't really matter if it's made in Ukraine or made in Lebanon or made in Dubai or made in France, but it's done well or well done, and I think customers also much more sort of open to buy from made in Indonesia because it's done well and it's not associated with perhaps high street fashion
and sweatshops. Tien Willemsen, I'd like to give the floor to you. You represent your own company above and beyond a brand consultancy. Tell us a little bit about what you feel about the importance with regards to luxury brands, since there are many of your clients, about where they're from and the extent to which they use that to get their message across, and the associations of made with them, indeed, whether these things can then be built.
Yes, our company, as you say, Above and Beyond, we have actually done various jobs for people like Aston Martin, looking at brand diversification and so on from the global point of view. But what I thought I might bring to the panel today is actually our agency is now based in Denmark after personally having lived abroad for many years, both in Asia and so on. And it's interesting what you say about Italy, because I know a lot about that region also, and it's really not nice what is happening at the moment. But there's a whole trend of globalization, and we can't stop that. So what I thought would be interesting to bring forward is that being based in Denmark, in Copenhagen, where I am now, there's actually been for years quite a trend in terms of taking our royal family and adding this whole thing about purveyor to the royal court, which also is very successfully done in the UK. And I was thinking, flying down here, that you also have your royal families here, and the initiatives that you're doing I actually think there's a whole level that can be explored there to great benefit. We also have in Denmark a long tradition of furniture, Scandinavian design, and again, this is something that has been supported by our government for years in terms of educating designers and giving them platforms, and even having the government do a lot to actually promote the furniture around the world, at export promotions. Again, our crown prince comes out and open the exhibitions, and I know the Japanese loves that and so on. So there's a lot of things there from a promotional brand building point of view that I think could be explored here. And then I think in general it always comes back to the fact of knowing it's about provenance, that's already being said, it's about being authentic. So again, if looking at the UAE and looking at Dubai, I think knowing exactly, which I'm sure you're already doing to a certain extent, where are your key skills? Where's your heritage? Look at the craftsmanship that's already here, and I can already come up with a couple of ideas just top of mind. For example, if you look at Hermès, you come from France, they started making saddles, and then they have the whole craftsmanship on the leather. Arabian horses is something that's known already worldwide. Obviously, you have one of the world's best airlines. You have the hotel business of Burj Al Arab and so on. That many things that are already world famous for the best in the world. So I think whether it's leather goods or you already have the kaftans that everybody knows, why not buy the Arabic label instead of buying kaftans from Roberto Cavalli or Pucci or whatever. So there are a lot of things that you can develop, I think, with great success. I was sitting in at the panel yesterday on perfumes, and as it was said, it's absolutely true. Tom Ford and so on, they use the wood, which is the tradition here again. So what I think globally is important, also linking back to the big brands, what they all do with success is that, yes, you come from somewhere, you have a provenance, you have heritage and a history, and thereby some kind of authority. However, you must think of the global taste. So just like in the food industry and so on, I mean, everybody suddenly likes sushi or Thai food. You can get everywhere, but it's not as spicy as it would be in Thailand, for example. So in the same way with luxury brands, you need to actually make sure that it has that international taste of flavor. So with perfumes, it shouldn't be too strong in terms of the wood flavor and so on, but it should be modified so that it's good for the global palate.
Yes, I would like to add one comment here, because I think this is great and is important, especially for Dubai, to think globally, because as mentioned also, one of the problems for the designer here is that the market is limited. If you think about Europe, you have countries with 60-80 million people like France, Italy, Germany. Here in the whole UAE we are 8 million, and the whole GCC countries, Saudi, Kuwait, Qatar, UAE, Bahrain, it's 33 million. So like the dynamics here of the industry is small compared to Europe or compared to US. But we have an advantage here, is that the population is represented by more than 200 nationalities. So I think this is also something that the designers here can leverage, is to experience their global customers within a city. And this is something unique for Dubai, because the city has attracted so many nationalities from the Arab countries, from Europe, from Asia, from the US. So it's already a melting pot, and you can see if your product works well for which segment. This is at the same time something that, as an emerging designer, you have to think about your brand and who are your target customers, because here you have such a variety of taste, nationalities, backgrounds, that is also like a challenge to cater for all. And I personally think that what is stand out from the designers here is the creativity. We have very visionary designers, and also the link with the heritage and the tradition of the embroidery. So this is something related to the Arab culture. And if you think about we call a modest fashion or conservative fashion, going back to the tradition, like with the abayas, the sheilas, there's a rich number of designers here, and some of those are evolving their style to make more international. For example, Bugessa, she's a young designer, and she started with her line of abaya, but now some celebrities they want to use because of the elegance of these pieces. And so we are moving from the traditional conservative, religious, traditional type of clothes to something that can be worn also in non-specific Islamic or religious condition, religious country.
And so going back to one of the points you were making earlier, it is important, of course, to understand your local brand, but in order to do that, you need to understand how it's perceived, picking up on those points, by others, how it's perceived elsewhere, and it won't be perceived everywhere the same. So it's quite a complex exercise.
Yes, it's complex because you have to capitalize on your positive assets, I would say, locally. And at the same time, you have to understand the negative perception that people may have with your country, hence with your brand coming from this country. I do agree that authenticity and the story that you tell around your brand is of very high importance, but you can't impeach people from associating your brand with the countries they think it comes from. Sorry. And I mean, you're right. When you say Prada, don't want to share the same, but when you say Prada, everybody thinks, says it's an Italian brand. Why a lot of the products are actually manufactured in Asia, and they're in Asia, not the Italian Asia. But still, people perceive it as made in Italy. You see my point? So even if you tell another story, a different story, same thing with Hermes. We spoke about Hermes and the skills that they have, the craftsmanship, but Hermes first never defines itself as a luxury brand, but as a super, high quality products providing brand. But then they are focusing on getting the best craftsmen throughout the world. So yes, you have scarves made in Tibet, so China, if you are going to Hermes, and it's not, but people still associate Hermes with made in France. You cannot, even if you tell a great story and you say, we are looking for the best skills throughout the world, there are people still associate your brand with.
So how do you explain that that's done Prada and Hermes no harm? Why not?
Well, first, because there is this image of France, but that they build upon this one, even if it's not made in France. Not everything is made in France. And then, they always point on the best quality and the best craftsmen for the world. It's not, this idea of I want to see my products being manufactured elsewhere for cost saving or for non-explicitly said reasons. Like they say, we are looking for the best craftsmanship in embroiderment, and we may go to Morocco or we may come here. For the towers, they are manufactured in Belgium. You see, so it's like everything is coming from a country which has been identified as being the best in doing something.
So it's a question of trust.
Absolutely. When we say authenticity is is related with trust and with telling the truth to consumers. In the end, when you tell your consumers why you are doing things,
Which goes precisely back to your point. Perhaps, Stefan, today the internet gives young designers the opportunity to tell their story, to build a trusting relationship with consumers, and therefore to sell things that aren't necessarily from a country associated with luxury or glamour or design.
Yeah, but to do that, you have to lead, and to do that, you have to have the guts to, bypass these mental associations that were just mentioned. If customers associate a certain country with cheap fashion or high-end fashion, whatever it is, and you want to prove that the opposite, then you have to do the opposite and stop. And it's going to be a hard process. I don't agree with sort of leaning back and saying France has always been associated with luxury fashion, therefore we'll promote that. I don't want to be sitting in any sort of luxury house at the moment, because there's brands like Gucci and many LVMH brands who have a huge problem, and they don't know where they're going to be in 10 years because they have in some way exhausted their possibilities in terms of using that story. And a brand like Dolce & Gabbana moved their production back to Sicily, not because the production is better, but because they're lacking this authenticity, and they're hoping in some way, in some desperate way, to sort of gain this Italian way of doing things again. And you sitting here from just mentioning Denmark, because I love what's happening in Scandinavia. I remember when I moved to the UK, my mom said, how are you going to eat, because I'm Italian, and now if you look at the best restaurants in the world, they're between Copenhagen and London. So, how has, the Scandinavian culinary experience gone from, not being famous at all to becoming, leading in the world? The same with Danish fashion. best cities in terms of nurturing its emerging designers, and they're doing that by creating opportunities. So I disagree with you in terms of saying, you know, Dubai has only, I don't know how many million people you mentioned before, but it's one of the most visited cities in the world. We opened a store during the Dubai Design District, the BT3 event. We had 22,000 people coming and we sold out, and we were probably the biggest store selling Middle Eastern designers, and those products were flying through the shelves. So the opportunity is here. You have to do it the right way. You have to find a way to communicate what you're doing, and yeah, just lead the way, and then you will change the perception of people of a certain region or country. But I associate Scandinavia to great food and design now. 20 years ago, that wasn't the case.
It wouldn't have been the case. You were making the point yesterday when we had this chat. It's the example of what's going on in the world of gastronomy in that part of the world is extraordinary. And 5 years ago, no one would have imagined it.
Probably 10, 15 years ago, yes, but still, it has been developed in a very, very short time span. And I think all we're talking about here today, and luxury brand, we have to remember that it's all about passion in the end of the day, and dedication and engagement. And I truly believe, you know, we're all global citizens now. It can actually come from anywhere. And it is true, and I'm happy you see that too, that Scandinavia has a lot to offer at the moment. But when you have restaurants like Noma being nominated year after year, the best restaurant in the world, and the French and the Italian chefs are standing there going, damn, happened again, and now they keep experimenting to the extreme. You know, you can eat ants and you can do all sorts of things that are smoked and cooked, and I don't know what.
What's behind it then?
Well, it's actually like that drive to do something really, truly, again, authentic, local. There's a lot about the sustainability of it, local produce from cabbage to whatever, getting the best out of that. So there's a lot of alchemy in it, which is also where the perfumes and so on started. So about being creative, I think is important. The other thing I just wanted to say briefly, as you said, yes, the government has supported also the whole gourmet kind of wave, and the whole new Nordic thing is happening at the same time. So it's both fashion, it's design, it's many things at the same time. However, I think also if we just step up to the super high end in the luxury business, because we're also dealing with super yacht shipyards and so on in my company, I think it's very interesting also to see that depending on where you are as a consumer, because the global luxury client, the amount of people that can buy luxury has really like doubled from sort of like 150 million individuals worldwide to just within the last 15 years being 350 million. So obviously the base of consumers is constantly increasing, which means that people are moving constantly upwards. Just the last couple of years, the amount of billionaires have doubled, which is also when, again, you talk about really the high, very exclusive things. And what I've seen is that the Middle Easterns, for example, are not just buying the German super yachts, which the Lursons of this world, which was always the thing to do. Now they also buy from Abu Dhabi Mar, for example, who bought some of the Nobis Krug and some of the Dutch shipyards and so on. But there's a certain pride in buying local. And I also see Russian oligarchs that before were the ones picking up the very expensive Swiss watches. Now they actually, with national pride, buy jewelry brands and watch brands from Russia and actually like to show it off, because to start with, no one knows it, but it's even more exclusive and more prominent. So that's an opportunity for you in Dubai too, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
And Phil, this is a problem, as was just being said, for the big brands, is it not? That as the world changes, as the number of possible consumers grows, perhaps with regional tastes, as the stories being told by designers coming from the bottom becomes more authentic and so on, the way of managing luxury brands changes. And it's for the big names that it's very difficult to know how to move on.
Yes, because they face, let's say schematically, a double market. Like you've got more and more people buying luxury, but less and less luxury educated people doing that. So they don't know about the history of the anthropology of luxury in general, the history of luxury in general, and even not of the brand, but so there is one specific area, and then you've got another market of people who is more and more educated. So the one which are what we call connoisseurs in the luxury, consumer behavior type. Those consumers are more and more demanding regarding, authenticity or transparency maybe on the origin of the product, the craftsman who is behind the product. And when I say origin of the product, it's not only about the product, but it's about the components of the product. So you want to know where the wool is coming from, where the embroiderment is made, where blah blah blah. But then when you are a huge brand, I mean, usually you have one way of doing, of making your strategy. So you have to, at the same time, educate people. You have at the same time to make exhibits, very simple exhibits, telling your story about your brand, not assuming that everybody knows what Cartier does and what they are doing. And at the same time, you have to make something which is much more exclusive and much more connoisseur-oriented strategy. So it's very difficult. And as just to take an example, we all remember, I guess, the Odyssey of Cartier movie. This movie was first issued in Europe, and then they put that in China, and it was a huge failure because people didn't understand the story of the dragon and the Great Wall of China. But when you know Cartier, when you know the brand, you know that it is part of the DNA of the brand, that they have a whole jewelry collection oriented with, Orientalism, blah, blah, blah. But then Chinese people, less educated, when I say educated, it's luxury capital or luxury education, it's not education in general. Those people just thought that Cartier made the movie having in mind that they wanted to target the Chinese market as a marketing trick, So then bad perception, etc., etc. So you have to face this double issue, which is not simple for big brands. I'm not saying that it's easier for smaller brands, but maybe because smaller brands have this tendency of working in a more confidential way in the end, it's easier for them to custom-made their strategy depending on their target. Might be the reason why. But yes. Nikita, do you want to respond to that?
So basically, thinking about the local designers and thinking of the scenario here, I would say that, and also commenting, the importance of tourism that is fundamental. I say that these designers here, some of them are still in the early stage, going back to the tradition, the royal family mentioned before. This is shaping some of the fashion designers here, and you see that the story that they want to tell is how precious, how important is their unique production. If I think about the couturier as an example, and names are like Michael Zinco, Rami Alali, those dresses, they're doing our work of art because of the uniqueness, because of the precious of the materials, the unique design. So this is the current status and their business. I envision one day, and this our goal as council, is that the next, let's say, Elisab, the next Zohair Murad, that of course they are Lebanese because we have to praise the Lebanese creativity. The next big designer coming out of this region will be from Dubai, representing their tradition, and the tradition is in the color. For me, the tradition is in the colors, is in the landscape, is in the calligraphy, in the heritage, and also making this brand famous internationally, thanks to the support of the government, and also thanks to the vision of the brand associated as the vision of the city. Because we mentioned before about the misconcept, about the region, about, I think Dubai, what Dubai stands for is make things happen fast and extraordinary. So I envision this next big brand coming out of this city to make it fast, extraordinary, and big international. Will not be easy, maybe will take some time. We are working.
But the role of the government and the support network that's been provided will have been crucial. Going back to the first point that Antoine made at the beginning, they needed that support network, and it is the efforts of councils like yours that will allow that creativity to flourish.
I think our role as a government is to connect the dots. So basically, to make sure that your brand with creativity has the right support in terms of scouting the secret fabric from Asia or from Europe, from Italy. For example, we have a lot of tradition in silk. Maybe not everybody knows about that. So connecting the dot and supporting with the international exhibition. This is something it's in our roadmap, and we want to make sure that we will take the most promising designers to showcase internationally. And we have this 4 major fashion weeks associated with a lot of trade shows. And for some of the designers, it's a major cost to participate to this show to also identify which is the best one for them to showcase and where they can find the buyers. This is something we are currently working on, looking at international to expand their market, but also supporting some of the exhibitions, some of the events here, because we need also to promote our local brands regionally. For example, a platform like Fashion Forward for fashion designers, D3 with all the initiatives the team is doing, or for example, in the design sector, events like Downtown Design, Design Days, and the next Design Week. All these initiatives are aiming at showcasing the talent here, making them, make the media aware of them regionally, and then after all these elements have been built, take those designers internationally. So this is, the strategy that we are putting in place, and of course the government is supporting in all elements, from facilitating the business, facilitating the connection, create networking opportunities, providing the support, for example, from the council, from the board of directors, and making sure like a designer like Rim Akram came to Dubai in March and nurture and mentor some of these designers, including this Bugessa that I was mentioning before. So it's really like an effort that we are doing at stages. And we developed a study, the Fashion 2020 study, back in 2013 with Bain, to really identify what takes to the city to become a fashion and design hub. And this is a long journey, and this is a journey that we aim at targeting the major milestone for the city, that is 2020, in line with the Expo. Of course, there are many activities that that we are doing, but remember that the four major cities, that Paris, Milan, New York, London, they have years, decades of tradition, of talent, of manufacturing, of sourcing material. So we are catching up.
So precisely, and I want to put you in a moment whether those capitals aren't going to be knocked off their perch, precisely by the kinds of efforts that you were talking about that Stefan's responsible for. First, though, does anyone have any questions? Because we've carried on without any contributions to any of our panelists about what we've been discussing.
It's not a question exactly, it's more a statement, which is a bit down to earth, but one point I haven't heard when we discussed creating a brand and going further international is the trademark. Something that since we are global, you should be very careful in Asia and Japan, covering North Asia, and there is a very touchy. And the Chinese are looking at all the brands which are coming up, and if they can, they reach in China first, but also in other countries. So that's one point I wanted to make, because I think it's very important that you see that the designer brand is going to grow and grow quickly and grow internationally. It's better to make a basic registration, and then you can enlarge to more countries. But that's the point I wanted to make.
So, Stefan, to you,
You have to share it with society, and you open it completely up, and that's how we had to start our website, because I started the company with no outside funding, and therefore we used the open source development community to take pieces of website code and put together our website with the benefit that we then share our code as well with, so if you want to copy our website, you can do that today. But you have to put it back into society if you make it better. And it was a problem that we had as soon as we had the first designers signing up, because you can go on our website and download high-resolution images of all our designers. So there's about 200,000 collections with about 1 million images that you can download, and they're free to take. And what we feel is that society moves much faster in a much more open way if we share whatever we create, and people tend to come back to the original if they're able to afford it, and if they in some way realize the value behind the products that you create. Very similar to if you compare a Louis Vuitton to a Vivienne Westwood. At Vivienne Westwood, they don't have a legal department dealing with copying, because they don't have the problem of that. Simply because Vivienne Westwood's designs are in some way too complicated to copy. She changes her style too fast, and she doesn't use the logo much. Therefore, that problem does not exist. And therefore, I'm a firm supporter of the open source world. Lately, we also have seen that the automotive industry is going that way. Tesla, instead of registering a patent for their batteries, have opened up the source code to how to create these batteries. In a way, of course, they know that there will be a group of scientists around the world taking that technology, making it better, but also feeding it back, and ultimately it will benefit Tesla itself because they are the biggest user of those types of batteries. So what we tell our designers is to be faster and have the original product, and we see that customers come back and take the original. Of course, we have a lot of problems with designers that say, yes, but Topshop now has just made that ring or that jacket and it looks the same. But we have tried to go against these high street retailers a lot of times, and usually it is a lot of effort spent in the wrong way. We have now, and that is hopefully a huge leap towards working with these brands. We have signed an agreement with Inditex, so Zara, which is the world's biggest retailer, and they came to us saying that A, they don't like to have the reputation of copying because they feel like they're actually a leader in the retail world, and B, they would like to work with emerging designers much more, but in an ethical and fair way. We've now, over the last year, created a system for our 18,000 designers to be able to sell design rights to Zara on a very automated way. So we came up with a price list. For example, if a designer creates a sample of a jacket and Zara likes that, they can behind the scenes buy that from the designer. They pay 5,500 euros directly into the pockets of the designer through us. Once the money arrives, we pass the design right and the signed contract to Zara, and Zara can then do what they want with that. And that's a fair way for, in some ways Zara is now investing in a lot of emerging designers around the world. At the same time, they're able to access the creativity, and it works in a very fair way. So that's our way of working with it rather than protecting and cheating us off.
It's a different approach entirely.
Yeah, I think from an ideological point of view, that is fantastic, and that is in a way the way things are going. We had another discussion, you were on another panel yesterday, in terms of the internet, and everything that's happening there is kind of in a way the opposite of high fashion and so on, and big luxury brands, because it's all about the democratization of everything that otherwise is like the Vatican and the pinnacle of luxury, and that you have to look up to and you have to buy into, and it's the rarity and so on. However, we have a couple of clients and also friends of ours that have major issues, as you say, in China at the moment, and actually family brands that people have invested a lot in, and they build up lots of points of sales, and suddenly the brand has just been taken, and the green triangle in one of the brands just turned around, turned blue, and they called it something very similar. And then you can start a Chinese law case for years, and they had protected the brand, and they really have issues because suddenly these Chinese manufacturers start selling it in Japan and other major luxury markets. So it's quite a serious thing if you're an established brand and suddenly you see everything you invested in is taken away. So if you are building brands, and I'm sure someone like the D3 are looking at, if you are protecting major brands, at least protecting it in maybe the US and China, and I protect quite a few of our brands that we create ourselves, because I also have my own luxury platforms, and in the EU now you can protect them in 27 countries in one go. So that's kind of where we start from, and then afterwards you have to look at the other markets.
Is that the kind of part of what you do for your design?
Intellectual property that is related to trademarks rights, and this topic is something that we are looking at as a key pillar under the policy and regulation within the strategy of the council. Actually, in the UAE, the IP laws are very well established and developed, but not many people are aware of them. So what we are doing is try to create awareness around these laws and try to facilitate, this process of trademark. Of course, as you mentioned, Europe has a major advantage that, the trademark is recognized centrally across all the European community countries, while here it's still not the case. So this is a broader discussion that, as I mentioned, we refer to our region as the MENA region, that is formed by 17 countries, and specifically about the GCC. So potentially in the next few years we will take this discussion at GCC level to make sure that the designer is enforced, their creativity is enforced within GCC and then after to MENA. But this will take time. But for UAE, we already have all this set of IP regulation in place.
I want to bring it back to our original discussion, which is about local and made in. I wonder, Flo, whether we've been discussing the impact of the internet, the changes, the challenges for big companies, the opportunities for smaller designers and for people starting out, and for regions, therefore, that perhaps haven't had so far the cachet or the brand associations of, say, Paris or Rome. Are France and Italy at risk of being knocked off their perch as a result of all these changes, the sort of democratization of the process, the world of internet, people like Stefan representing designers from everywhere, and ordinary stories perhaps being more effective today than big brands, especially in the luxury world?
Well, there is always a risk if they forget where is their soul. But the point is, as long as they keep, their authenticity where it should lie, I mean, that's fine. But if they go in several directions simultaneously, then in the end, people don't perceive them as Parisian brands, but as global brands. And there is a risk then of losing this image, I would say. But just to come back, on Dubai, which might become a place for fashion, etc. I mean, just looking at the history of Milan, Milan is not a fashion city, luxury city since very long. I mean, originally it was Firenze, and it was in 1962. So, I mean, Italy became luxury, capital of luxury with Paris in the 20th century. It's not something very new. It was completely made up by a given count which wanted, to reinvent the imaginary of around Italy, and he linked that to Renaissance. So that's how the story came. But so yes, it is possible to build, an image for a fashion place as long as you associate that with some kind of authenticity, which sounds like trustable from the country perspective. Firenze, Milano, they capitalized on, the history of Italy. So Dubai can become a very important fashion luxury place as long as it capitalizes on its own history or its own asset, as you said, Misaeli, where everything is fast and everything is possible at some point. And there is a risk, to come back to your question, the risk for us, for our European countries like Paris, Milan, or even London, is in the end, because it sounds like a given, people don't push it anymore. It looks like it's natural to see things happening there. So there is nothing very dynamic happening in such places. In France, we have this debate around, the support of local designers, etc., which is very poor. In Italy, they also have the same discourse, like local designers are very scarce in Italy and don't have a clue about how to launch a brand, etc., etc. So we have the big names, but then where it's going to be, the rejuvenation of those places, that's still a question mark. So there is a danger.
And whereas in Scandinavian countries, of course, the up-and-coming young artists have that huge support from them.
And it's almost kind of happening by itself. But I just wanted to say, in general, what we're discussing here today, I think, first of all, the big brands, I do think they have tremendous advantages because they have the resources and they already have recognition and so on. But I do also think everything we're discussing here in Dubai, just the mere fact that there is this Arab Luxury World Conference happening at the level it is, which is extremely professional. There's also this sort of aspect of past, present, and future. And there's no doubt that France, Italy, and so on, even if we go to the States now, which is one of the newer luxury sort of places in terms of brands that are now established, it took Japan, for example, quite a long time to get the first sort of Japanese designers being recognized worldwide. Yet I think I was recently at the Moscow Fashion Week, and when you look at Russia, what's happening, I was seeing, again, some of the international brands being there on the catwalk, and suddenly this brand was on stage, and I thought it was like Valentino or something like that. And actually, I forgot now what the brand is called, but it's a Russian brand, and they went to the heritage of the Romanov, and all the Tsar and the heritage, and it looked amazing. It might as well actually have come from Dubai or something like that. So what's happening in Shanghai, what's happening in Moscow, what's happening in Dubai, looking again at past, present, and future, that's already the now. So I do agree Cyril was saying from Bain yesterday, you have to invest. And then I think certain of the European kind of old countries are a little bit more relaxed and do not really have the capital and the government support.
Yeah, Stefan, your view then on the role of government. Does it have to come from government? How significant is it?
Yes, it has, because I think there's certain structural issues that have to be in some way bypassed. I was in Istanbul last week, and while discussing all the fantastic awards and fashion weeks they have, at the same time I sat down with designers and they told me that there's not one single store in Istanbul that sells Turkish designers on a wholesale basis. So designers can only, if they're from Turkey, they have to sell on a consignment basis, which means they have to produce half the entire risk, and then basically use the shop as a sort of retail outlet, and they only get paid, after 6 or 7 months after actually selling that piece. At the same time, 3 weeks ago we finished the second edition of our probably biggest project so far, and our client is the region of Venice. And we were approached 3 years ago by them, plus a few local luxury brands like Bottega Veneta, the ex-CEO of Valentino, the Marzotto Group. And they were saying that Italy at the moment loses one manufacturing technique a month. So basically the expertise, the heritage of these small businesses all scattered around in northern Italy are in some way on the brink of failing, simply because on one side they can't fulfill the orders of the big brands anymore. The orders have become too big. At the same time, they're not available to the global community of designers, simply because they don't speak English, they don't have a website, they're not very active, or they don't know how to market themselves. And our idea was to bring the two worlds of designers and manufacturers together. And now for the second edition, we understand it's quite a big project. We actually physically flew 100 of our best designers from they were each all from different countries around the world. We flew them into Venice, half an hour outside of Venice. They built a huge 15,000 square meter pavilion, and we basically brought together manufacturers and designers for a week. So we had the conditions were that everyone had to bring their workshops. So we had a designer with their workshop from Japan sitting next to the workshop from an Italian brand which makes the fabrics for Chanel, again paired with the designer, and that happened for the second time, and it had such a great effect on the region that we're now doing it for the third time, and we really want to sort of export that model. Perhaps we can bring it to Dubai at some point, where we really bring two worlds together that need to be communicating, but they
Thus
don't.
rejuvenating perhaps places
Absolutely.
where things are done
Yeah.
because the government.
Yeah, and we saw, I don't know how many of the 100 designers canceled their return tickets, and then actually drove to those family-owned businesses and started working with them. So that's a way to, in some way, create an identity as well.
And Flo, these are the kinds of...
I just wanted to elaborate on your point because you were mentioning this lack of connection between manufacturers and designers, and I would go a little bit further saying the lack of connection between marketers and business people and manufacturers and designers. You can't imagine in business schools and the various curriculum that people have, they don't even have a clue about the fabrics, about the traditional places of manufacturing for perfume, for clothes, for etc. etc. There is a lack of product knowledge in the end.
So it is the real story.
The real, and this is where, because when we speak about the made in, to come back to the topic of the title of the conference, when we speak about the made in, it's not only about where is the brand made, but it's also where the components are made. And this is of tremendous importance, especially for Italy and France. We have the same issue in France as what you are describing, like a lot of know-how which are just lost because of lack of, exchange with, as I said, if you go to even big brands, and it's not even, it's many is the case in big brands, by the way, you have purchasers who are in charge of purchasing, let's say, lace, and they cannot make the difference between super quality Calais lace and lace coming from China, which is another one which is called Rachel, which is a different type of lace. Sounds very technical, but when you are purchasing lace, that's something you should know, But if you can't make the difference, then you're just looking at the price, the cost, and you see that it's, much more expensive this lace made in the northern part of France or in some places in Italy, and compared to the lace in China. And you don't see the difference. So in the end, you're just going for, connection between, again here, students in business school who are studying to become, marketers, purchase people in those big companies, and manufacturers and designers. They don't speak with one another.
I think that's a really good point. That I think we stopped telling the story of fashion in terms of fashion for people at the moment starts with the finished product and ends and goes through the celebrities, the fashion shows, the sales, the stores. But when we had this event 2 weeks ago, we had a group of journalists from around the world that we flew in, and I was showing them around, and two of the comments that just made me really wake up was, one was a lady from quite a famous magazine said, I didn't even know shoes were made that way, and basically we went to Stefan Venezia, and they're one of the last manufacturers of shoes. They do the shoes for Dries Van Noten, and they do them by hand, and then we went over to a company that has brought silk production back to Europe. So it's the only manufacturer in the world, in Europe at the moment, that produce silk, and they had the actual silk worms there. And I don't know if you ever had these silkworms in your hand. They're quite big and they're very cute as well. And they didn't know silk was made that way. And I think it's astonishing that young kids today, if you go, especially in the UK, if you go to school and you ask a 15-year-old girl how much a pair of shoes should cost, she will tell you £9.99. That's sort of the maximum. So for them, that's the value of a pair of shoes. But an iPad is okay to cost £600-700. So the value of made in, coming back to discussion, I think the value chain has to change. We need to appreciate where items are made, and I think perhaps before you guys start with a real fashion week, maybe we should start with something else, which is much more about telling the story of products made in the Emirates. What does it mean to produce something here in the Emirates? And I think that will be the value of what comes out of this region.
Just elaborating on that, drawing the parallel to the new cuisine again, and the provenance there, it's actually again going back to when you hear these top chefs, they're actually walking around, touching the corn, saying, look at this is what I use for the bread. They look at the produce in the ground and the salad and the cabbages, and they pull it out with pride like the farmers did 100 years ago. But again, it's actually the ingredients and how it's grown and produced, back to how you say also the craftsmanship and so on. So I think actually there's a whole trend towards that, but fashion is moving so fast now, so this whole fast forward has to be pulled back a little bit so that people appreciate, and that comes to an even more intellectual discussion about, which I hear across the board also, about how much can you actually own and have instead of sort of being and being conscious. I mean, conscious consumption instead of just buying more and more and cheaper and faster and faster. Because if we slow down a little bit, then you also stop the aspect about counterfeit and copying and all these kind of things, but actually being proud of what you buy, where it comes from. And I think that's the best way to build a brand.
On which point we're going to have to bring this to a close unless there were any more questions about this particular topic. Thank you very much to the panel for taking part. It was a really interesting discussion. Thank you to you for being here. Thanks also to those who
Where were you before? Also advertising. And now all in advertising, but not all in grade.
We don't speak Spanish because they don't want to put modest or concept. But there is lack of, because like what sells in Indonesia doesn't sell everyone. Because for example, Indonesia they like very
Tamil format.
and now they are moving out, se vaya
No, no, no,
a
no,
Round.
no.